Welcome into the Big City Sports Podcast. We have another episode coming up. And yes, I know I'm a Cubs fan rocking the White Sox hat today because they're in the playoffs and the Cubs are on their couch. Jed Hoyer spoke to the media today, said they don't want to win the offseason, so take whatever you want there. But we'll talk White Sox postseason preview here, get into the NFL. All three of our football teams won this week. But before we talk anything, I need to know how my man Swig is doing.
I'm doing pretty good, my guy. I'm still recovering from the Yankees being the predictable disappointment. We'll get more into them when baseball season is over. But yeah, not a great ending to a very, very frustrating season overall. I just quick preview for a few weeks from now, right? That season included a 13-game winning streak. It included a Kluber no-hitter. It included 3 triple plays. And it was still, I think, the most frustrating season I've ever sat through. It was just, they made the playoffs. They proved me wrong, I guess. They didn't show up once they got there, but they got in for whatever that's worth to you. We'll see.
Yeah, it was an interesting ride to be a part of with the New York Yankees. But hey, as one season ends, another one begins. So that means the NHL season begins next week. We'll dive into our preview on that too. The Rangers, Hawks have some sort of life behind them this year. Maybe they're a playoff team. Islanders, they've been a playoff team we've covered many times on this show. So hockey preview coming up next week. But let's start right now. As we're on the topic of previews, let's look at the Chicago White Sox. They're back in the playoffs. This time they don't have to worry about a 3-game wild card situation like last year against Oakland. They'll be playing Dusty Baker in the Houston Astros, who usually know how to get it done in postseason time.
Yeah, well, they might have had some help that wasn't exactly legal to help them with that.
But do you get a buzz?
Yeah, just gotta get some ringers, get some trash cans. You know the drill. I'm not thrilled about it. Yeah. So we have 2 pretty evenly matched teams, I'd say, in this series. They have a lot of the same strengths and weaknesses. They both have 2 of the oldest managers in Major League Baseball. So definitely some interesting parallels to draw there. But the White Sox, I know it's been a little while since we've talked about them, but they've kind of been locked into this scenario for a while. They played in a division where they were clearly the dominant team. It was clear they were going to win that division and be locked in to avoid the wild card game. And it also was pretty clear that they weren't going to finish with the best record in the American League. So we knew that they were most likely going to play the Astros, especially when the Rays got hot at the end of the season. So it wasn't really too much to say. They've gotten healthier recently. Luis Roberts come back and has torn the cover off the ball. Yasmani Grandal has been really good. And you could argue they've been the White Sox best hitters, even though they both missed a good chunk of the season.
Yeah, Lou Bob coming back. He's taken off big time there in center field. He's been that threat that they've needed in that offense for quite some time. So it's taken him a little while to get going. Obviously, started the year hurt, but he came back in a big way, and he's been a big part of them. But the real question, I think, I mean, you look at all facets. You look at all facets of the game and everything that takes place in 3 areas: the pitching rotation, the bullpen, and then you also look at the offense. And I look at this team and I see 3 areas where they're strong. But as the season lingered on, the second half of the season, it was the pitching rotation that sort of showed some weaknesses. Lance Lynn got knocked around a little bit. Giolito got even worse. Carlos Rodon started to get some injury issues. Then the bullpen, they trade for Kimbrel to pair with Liam Hendricks, but that sort of fell apart. So I think the pitching is one area that the White Sox right now might be a little bit questionable at.
Yeah, there's the talent is definitely there, and the playoff experience is there. So is there the possibility that they just turn it around and lock in? I don't think it's out of the question, but at the same time, we talked about the trouble, which of Hendricks and Kimbrel should be closing and which one should be the setup man. I know that was a little bit of a controversy when Kimbrel first came over. And then on top of that, Dallas Keuchel, the former Astro, has been a little bit, I'd say, up and down at various points. So we know what he's capable of, but I don't think he's the dominant pitcher he was a few years ago either. At this point in his career, he's more of a number 4, number 5. And in the playoffs, you only need 4 starting starting pitchers. So I'm curious to see which of them they end up using more as a piggyback or a long relief kind of role. Because there's definitely going to be a point, I think, in this series. Both of these teams have prolific enough offenses where at least one of these games is going to get high scoring early. And that's the kind of game where you're going to need your fifth starter to give you 2 or 3 innings that your other relievers might not be able to. And thankfully for the White Sox, their fifth starter is still better than a lot of teams' number 2 or 3.
Yeah, for sure. And you look at Houston right now, and Houston, the last time these two, not the last time, but when the White Sox went to Houston to play that series early on in the year, Houston kicked their ass. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Dusty Baker wiped the floor of Tony La Russa and the White Sox company right there. So he found a way to get it done. But right now, I see this White Sox team. I mean, let's switch over to the Astros side of things now. You know, their rotation, Lance McCullers is now their ace after losing Justin Verlander, of course. They still have Zach Greinke. He's a little iffy if that's the case. But Jose Urquidy, Framber Valdez, a couple nice arms that have really helped them out this year, young arms. And I think they could play a big role in this series as well. Like you said, very evenly matched. I think Houston, postseason-wise, it's Carlos Correa who always steps up in the playoffs. It doesn't matter what the series is. Doesn't matter what year it is. He always comes up and he hits, and that's going to play well into a contract extension. But that's a conversation for another time.
Well, I think it might play into this being a swan song in Houston because he's part of that loaded free agent class at shortstop, and I'm sure we'll get into that in the offseason. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ends up going to the Tigers and reuniting with AJ Hinch. We'll see what happens there. So, but if that ends up happening, we're going to come back to that clip. I have more trust in the middle of the rotation and bullpen arms of the White Sox than I do with the Astros. I think the bullpen has been a bit of an area of weakness for them for a couple of seasons. And as much as Urquidy and Valdez are talented and young with upside, I don't know how much I trust them against a really talented White Sox lineup. And Greinke not being quite as dominant as he was in his run with the Diamondbacks before it, and obviously missing Verlander. Like I like Lance McCullers a lot. I still would give the White Sox an edge pitching wise. Now the lineup for the Astros is pretty loaded. Pretty much everything outside of Martin Maldonado and behind the plate is an offensive plus. And and I don't mean that to insult him, but if there's one hitter in the lineup that you cannot let beat you, it's him, because everyone else up and down that lineup from Altuve to Correa to Bregman to Brantley to Gurriel, you get the idea. They are all very proven hitters, and we all know that they're going to cause at least some damage at various points in the series. So I don't see either team running away with this one. They both have similar strengths and weaknesses. I think it's going to go all 5 games.
Yeah, I see it going 5 games as well. That's a good point. You mentioned all the names. Now, obviously, I know Correa, I know everybody else, but you start throwing out Brantleys and Gurriels, and I'm sitting here thinking, look, these are a lot of players with postseason experience. I mean, going up against the White Sox, who still have some young players with Eloy and a bunch of other ones in the mix right there. Cesar Hernandez, he was a part. I mean, he barely played in the postseason either. So there's not a lot of postseason experience on that White Sox side, which is huge on the Houston Astros side. However, the manager's been there, Tony La Russa. That's where my next question comes in. Now, Dusty Baker's been to the postseason many times, but he never can get over the hump, whether it's with the Washington Nationals not being able to beat the Cubs in the NLDS, or many times throughout his career just coming so close but not winning it. Tony La Russa's won. Do you think that will have any factor if this does go Game 5? Do you think Dusty sort of out micromanages himself?
I don't think it's impossible. Both of them being older, like I guess old school managers, I think they're less likely to micromanage themselves than a Kevin Cash type who overmanaged the hell out of himself with Blake Snell in last year's World Series, for example. I think that's less likely to happen here with these guys being so experienced and a little bit less reliant, I should say, on the analytics and everything. So I don't think it's out of the question, but I also think the rosters are both talented enough where it's going to make some of the decisions for these managers where they can't step on their own toes too much, or at least I hope not for their sake. Goes to a Game 5. Who has home field advantage again?
I think it goes to Houston.
I think they finished a couple games ahead. I think that would be a factor. I really do. So I wasn't a huge fan of the La Russa hiring. And I've always thought Dusty Baker was pretty likable until he goes to the Astros. Because
Right.
I'm not going to lie to you here. I do not want the Astros to win this series. I don't want to see them succeed. Um, to answer your question, I think it's possible, but being at home, I think there would be a little bit less pressure on them, honestly. They're not going to have the extremely hostile crowd environment that I'm sure they will have in Chicago for even more reasons than there's a team
Especially
trying
the
to end the
South
season.
Side.
It's gonna be really hectic. It might not be quite as violent as say a Yankees crowd or a Dodgers crowd would be. It's gonna matter though. Like people don't forget about that. So I'm excited to see what the White Sox fan base has in store for them. I don't see him beating himself, but I do see the White Sox pulling it off in Game 5 anyway.
Oh, I love that. Love that take. I love Dusty Baker. Going back, he's always got those gloves on. He's got medical gloves, but he's all dapped up in the gear. He's got the wristbands. He's got everything going on to make him seem like he's going out there to play the game. So I love that going on with Dusty Baker. I mean, that's something. He's got the toothpick in. He's got everything ready to go. I mean, that guy is awesome. But I actually am siding. I know I got the White Sox hat on. I'm rooting for the White Sox, obviously, here on the show. I just think the Houston Astros postseason experience is enough to get it done. So I'm going to go with the Astros in 5. That's my take.
That's fair. I hope it's wrong. Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm a White Sox fan or anything, but yeah, I just being a Yankees fan, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't want the Astros to succeed, but I do think that considering all the investments the White Sox have made here, I think this is a year where they have to at least win one round. I
Yeah.
don't. I didn't see them winning the World Series at the beginning of the year. I don't think. I'd be honest. I'd have to go back and check what I said in the preseason. But I right now my pick to win it all is the Rays. I don't really want that to happen either, if I'm being honest with you. But
Yep.
I still think the White Sox, as aggressive as they are, I thought La Russa was still a weird choice at the beginning of the year. I still think they're one more year away, but the talent is absolutely there. I think at least playing in that wild card series, most of the roster is on it. That'll help a little bit. That's better than no experience at all. And I think we haven't really talked about much of the lineup for the White Sox outside of Luis Robert and Grandal. I mean, this is a lineup that includes Tim Anderson and Jose Abreu, among others. So there's plenty of lumber up and down both of these lineups. I expect it to be a pretty good slugfest. Like, I do think that the pitching will be neutralized to an extent. I expect to see more, I don't know, 6-5 kind of games rather than
Yeah.
a 3-2 kind of game.
I hear that. I think it'll be good. I have one more point on baseball. This is sort of not necessarily our teams, but hey, if the White Sox sneak into the ALCS and they play Tampa Bay, I want to make a point here about the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, this year, I know they found a way to get to where they are. I don't know how they win games, but they piece it together and they find a way to do it. I personally do not think that they have a go out and win it starter right now. If you say, okay, game on the line, game 7, who takes the baseball? I don't think that they are 100% confident in Shane McClanahan or a rookie Shane Baz to go out there and start that game. I know they're going to find a way to piece it together, but all I'm saying is if it's the White Sox and the Rays or anybody else left in this postseason, I'm taking their ace over the Tampa Bay Rays ace, and that's just how I feel. I don't think they have one right now with the loss of Tyler Glasnow this year, losing Morton and also Snell in the offseason. That's my take right there, is that the Tampa Bay Rays do not have an ace that can win them a big game, which will eliminate them from the playoffs.
They don't have an ace that is likely to go out and throw you 7 innings of 1-run ball and win the game mostly by himself. But the Rays don't win or even operate as a traditional team, and it's worked to their advantage. So you go one of the Shanes that you just mentioned, you could use one of them. You could use a guy like Michael Wacha as an opener. You could go Ryan. I wouldn't do that either. I highly doubt the Rays are going to. I'm just spitballing. God. You could go Ryan Yarbrough after him for some length. They always find ways to piece it together. And I know that every pitcher on that roster is going to have a role, because I don't see them getting more than a few innings out of the starter, even if they're good ones. But they are the masters of knowing who to line up, what relief pitchers, whether it's Kittredge or whoever. They have Fairbanks. They all succeed out of nowhere. It doesn't make sense, but it's effective. So I think they are capable of winning in non-traditional ways.
That's fair. I mean, we've seen them do it multiple times. But let's talk about a team that we could say they won in non-conditional ways here with the Chicago Bears. They finally found a way to win. And it was with Justin Fields on the field. Take notes, Nagy. I know you finally decided to name him the starter. Losing David Montgomery in this game's big. Obviously, they went on to beat the Detroit Lions with the final score of 24-14. Lions made a little bit of a comeback late. Didn't really matter. The Bears finally got another win here in this season to go to 2-2, and Justin Fields is the starter long term.
Yeah, I think that last thing you said is the most important. I thought they were going to be able to squeak out the game against the Lions. And I think it was a little bit more one-sided than that score would indicate. I think the Bears were actually in pretty good control of this one from the start. And I think a really encouraging sign from the game itself was that Fields, who the whole team, the whole Nagy situation, there was a lot of blame to go around after that Cleveland game. But I know Detroit's a much less intimidating opponent, but excuse me, I do think it was a good thing to see that horrible game against Cleveland didn't rattle him. It clearly wasn't still in his head. He was able to move past that pretty quickly. There's still going to be some kinks to iron out. He's a rookie. There's still a lot for him to learn. And I think as a whole, it's good not to judge rookie quarterbacks too much based on their first year. So we'll take everything that happens with a grain of salt, but I think it was definitely at least a step in the right direction. The offense was able to move the ball down the field pretty early. The Montgomery loss is going to matter. That's going to be a big impact on the run game because I think he's proven himself to be one of the league's more talented running backs here. And I always thought he was an average, a solid starter. I didn't see this kind of upside with him until more recently. And him being out 4 to 5 weeks with a leg injury, I'm curious to see how close to 100% he is when he comes back.
Yeah, Damian Williams has experience. He's been a backup running back basically his whole career. Found a way to get some reps with KC a few years ago and take over a starting job there. But, I mean, David Montgomery, to your point, he showed some elusiveness this year that I didn't think he had, especially opening night against the Rams. He was making a lot of guys miss. So I think he's a great piece to have. There's one thing that concerns me a little bit, and I know they switched play callers here. Bill Lazor called plays this week, which they should do because they win football games when that happens. But Justin Fields completed 11 passes this week. He only completed 6 last week. So he's completed 17 passes in 2 weeks. Do you think that's a little bit of a concern, or do you think it's the offense that he's behind?
I think it's a bigger concern now that you can't lean on the running game as much.
Right.
I think it was smarter, especially against the Lions team that just got dicked over against the Ravens that might have been feeling that a little bit, where you can ease him in a little bit. And the fact that they didn't have to have him win the game with his arm right away is probably a good thing to settle him in confidence-wise. Now, without Montgomery, now I'm not saying Damian Williams or I like the Khalil Herbert pick. I'm not saying that they can't at least provide something in the run game, but there is going to be a drop-off, and you're going to have to get more out of the passing game behind a pretty bad offensive line. And the schedule does get much more difficult from here. So I do think that is a concern. The Bears, I still think, have a lot of question marks on that side of the ball. There's definitely some playmaking hope there. And the Dodgers are going to the NLDS there. They just did a walk-off home run.
Wow. How about that?
Sorry for the interruption. For anyone
on cue, we'll take that.
Yeah. Sorry for anyone expecting some football talk there, but we're recording this late Wednesday night. Chris Taylor just did a 2-run walk-off home run for anyone who cares about that.
How about that? Dodgers-Giants setting up. Great
series. They won 105 games in the regular season. They don't deserve to lose after one. That's it. They earned it. Anyway, now I can turn this off and be more focused because okay. But since the Bears are not going to be able to run the ball as well with the Montgomery injury, they're going to have to put more on the shoulders of Fields. And I think it'll be good for him in the long run. But I also think that means there are going to be a few losses in a row here with the tougher schedule and the fact that not every team is going to be the Lions on your schedule. I think it's a good thing to build some confidence. I also don't think I think the next few games might be more of a reality check.
Yeah, I think it will be too. I mean, it's a tough stretch right here coming up for these Bears. Obviously, rookie quarterback, lack of run game, not going to help you out a lot. But I do want to mention the defense. I know you're going up against Jared Goff, who historically has been atrocious when playing the Bears. I thought that the defense looked a lot better this week. Alec Ogletree actually had 10 tackles in that contest. I don't know how he's still producing at the age he is and the production that he's putting up, but it's crazier things have been seen. But I think this Bears defense showed a little bit of life this week, but they're still not going to be the best in the league by any standards.
The Bears had a really horrible week one on defense against the Rams, and it's been a lot better since. I think, like, I read an article that I think made a valid point where even though the Lions only scored 14 points, they did move the ball up and down the field pretty easily. And while they didn't convert as much as they should have, partially because they're the Lions, if the defense is that lax against better teams, they're going to lose.
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
I I think we might have overreacted a little bit to how poorly they played in week one. I think there's definitely been signs of a rebound since then. Sean Desai's done a solid job. We mentioned guys like Roquan Smith breaking out. Don't talk to me about Ogletree, but do talk to me a little bit about Travis Gibson, who I don't think we've even mentioned yet. And he's getting limited snaps and he's producing. He's gotten some sacks. He's getting tackles behind the line of scrimmage. And with Khalil Mack, I don't think at 100%. That matters. So I think they're getting some production from the defensive line in spots that they might not have expected. Still got some question marks in the secondary. Eddie Jackson's been disappointing. I think the Bears overall are going to be a middle of the pack defense. And I don't see their offense being top tier either. And I think Fields is still going to be a great piece for them long term. I don't think he's going to win you too many football games this year. And I don't think that offensive line and now a limited running game is going to do them any favors. So there's still reasons to be hopeful. I don't think that 2021 is going to be a 500 record for much longer.
I'll co-sign on that. I think the Bears are not set up well for success in 2021. You bring up a good point about Travis Gibson. He obviously had the big preseason with the Bears, found his way on the roster, and has made the most of his opportunity. Still no Eddie Goldman. He has not played in a game in 2 years, so hopefully everything's going well with him. He progresses, and we see him back in a Bears uniform and on the football field here soon. But, I mean, hey, Travis Gibson's got an opportunity. He stepped up. He's made some plays. I think 4 sacks in the game combined for the Bears defense last week. Obviously, the Lions offensive line, not the best in the league, but, you know, it's still nice to put up those performances from that defense to show you still got it.
No doubt. I know it seems like it's so much later in the season than 4 weeks, and the Bears are 2-2. They're not even doing that bad record wise, but it's already been a circus of a year with the quarterback situation and Nagy and the blowout week one, and it's just they're a weird team. They always have been a weird team. We can't call them boring, but the injury doesn't help with Montgomery. But I think long term, finally, first of all, I agree Bill Lazor needs to be calling plays, but more importantly, Fields finally announced as the starter full time going forward. It's about fucking time, guys. I'm sure Bears fans are ready to co-sign on that one. And now I'm going to officially stroke myself off for predicting week 3 for Justin Fields being the full-time starter, because now I can do it for real.
He has been named the full-time starter, and he did start week 3. So there you go. Andy Dalton has not started since then, so therefore you take the cake. We'll take that one. But looking forward here, the Raiders coming up. We've been picking the games as we've gone on throughout the season. Do you think that they beat the Raiders this week?
I don't. I think it'll be closer than people think, though. I like the Raiders. They've off to a good start. I've actually, as a bettor, I don't bet much, but I've gotten all 4 of the Raiders games right so far. So I'm hoping that continues here. That as bettors, you have that team that screws you over every week. The Raiders have been the opposite so far. So let's hope that keeps going. I'm gonna go Raiders by 10. I'm gonna go 27-17.
Yeah, okay, 27-17. I think it's a little bit more defensive. I think the Raiders win this one still by 10. I'll say 23-13. That's where I'm sitting here.
You're gonna fucking negotiate over 4 points here.
Yeah, 4 points. A little bit more defensive.
Okay. I see how this is. Whatever. God.
Well, let's look at the New York Giants, who have probably made you happy. They won their first football game of the year this year, and they defeated the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans with a packed crowd for the first time in 2 years, coming off of the hurricane. They went in there and they handled business. So the Giants win that one in overtime. Saquon Barkley looked very fresh, and he looked very good. What were your takeaways from the Giants game?
What the hell just happened was my first takeaway. I watched that Giants game a little bit differently than I normally do. That game started at 1. The Yankees played their game 162 at 3:00. And considering they had to win to get in, the Yankees were kind of my number one priority on the day. So I had them on my big screen. I had the Giants on my computer that I'm using right now to in front of me. But so I'm watching both as best I can. And it was a little bit different, but not having like full attention paid to the Giants like I normally do. Like I was still knowing what everything that was going on, obviously, but I still couldn't believe it. This is a team that fell behind by double digits on the road. They played like a team that had no business winning for 3.5 quarters. They couldn't tackle Taysom Hill. They made him look like Edgerrin James. And then they played not to lose in the fourth quarter again and somehow pulled it out anyway. This is the same team that finds ways to lose against Washington and Atlanta, and then they somehow beat the Saints. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't see that one coming, but especially offensively, there were at least some positive signs for a change.
My go-to word these last few weeks with the Giants has been testicular fortitude, and I wish they would show some.
That's
I
two
think
words.
that, well, my go-to phrase, I should say. You look at them. Honestly, if you take away the false start or the offsides in the Washington game, and if you hold on to Atlanta, this is a 3-1 football team right now. So I mean, they're not too far off. If they showed some testicular fortitude in those games, I think we're seeing a winning record there with the Giants. But obviously, that's not the case. They still found a way to win. That's good coming back. Daniel Jones, though, obviously he threw the pick. That was a deep Hail Mary. Doesn't really matter. He had 400-plus yards, 2 touchdowns. He ran the ball for 27 yards. He looks great to start the year. Not a lot of people are talking about Daniel Jones or talking about Sam Darnold. Daniel Jones looks pretty darn good to start this year.
I'll get to him in a second. I mean, you mentioned how close the Giants are being to being 3-1, and I think that's accurate. Like, if the Giants were 3-1 right now, there'd be a much different narrative on the season. But you mentioned testicular fortitude. I mean, speaking of testicles, I mean, like my grandpa used to say, if grandma had balls, she'd be grandpa. If the Giants weren't so stupid, they'd have a flipped record right now. It's just I get what you're saying, but unfortunately, that's just not the case. And the Giants have a much tougher schedule coming up as well. And I rattled them off last week in the middle of my rant, and I even though they managed to pull off one against the Saints here, like going forward, like for it to mean anything, it can't just be one feel good week. If they just go out and lose the next couple, which frankly I think is going to happen, they're going to be 1-5, 2-6, whatever. They're still in the same spot overall, despite the flashes, and that's not going to be good enough. So we'll see. They have to go out and find a way to beat Dallas, which is not an easy task at all, considering how good their offense is. And the Giants are going to have to go out there and win a shootout, and I still wouldn't call that a strength of the team. Now we'll get to Jones. I think that was the best game of his career so far. And he's been solid to start the season. The only real turnover he had that mattered was in week 1 against the Broncos with that fumble. Outside of that, he sure as hell wasn't at fault for the Washington game. I didn't think he was quite as good in the Atlanta game, but definitely he didn't lose them the game either. So he's been solid. And what I've said a lot is, even though he's been limiting the mistakes, I still don't see him as a guy who's going to go down and win you too many games, but he definitely was able to do that in this game to an extent. And it really started halfway through the fourth. And there was, to me, the turning point in the game, or at least what I thought was the turning point in the game, was when it was 14-10 New Orleans and the Giants had the ball. We had a 3rd and 2 and Ingram dropped it, what would have been a first down, and we punt. I'm like, yeah, I just rolled my eyes and yelled a few expletives at Ingram like I always do. And then the Saints went right down and made it 21-10. And I legitimately thought that was it. And for the last few years, the Giants given me every reason to think, yeah, that's game right there. But they finally got it. And then we went 3 and out after that. We punted from the plus side of midfield with 10 minutes to go down
Right.
11, which just, as you might expect, pissed me off. And then we finally stopped Taysom Hill on the QB power to the right side, get a 25-yard punt return, and that first touchdown and 2-point conversion cut it to 3. A 1-play drive with a 55-yard touchdown to Saquon Barkley. That was nice. I like that.
Yeah, I bet you did like that. I bet you liked the one to John Ross, too. John Ross with the big touchdown dropped right down in there for him. Yeah, he had a nice touchdown in that one. And Kadarius Toney finally saw an impact on the field. We talked about the Slayton injury and what he could possibly bring. He saw the most of his opportunity and put up a big performance.
Yeah, I'll get into wide receivers in a second. I want to keep going with Jones first. I thought the throws he made in overtime were fantastic. I thought he really stood in behind an offensive line that's been, I think, a little bit better than we expected. It hasn't been good by any means, but Andrew Thomas has been off to a nice start this season. He's definitely been a bright spot, and I am happy to see that because he had a pretty bad rookie year, especially in the first half. It was a little better after, but then the one preseason game he played this in this summer, he looked awful. So I definitely didn't see him being the best offensive lineman so far coming, but not upset because we need it. We invested a high pick into him, and finally this is the first stretch of games where we started to justify that a little bit. I hope it continues. But Jones he's been solid. He has that one interception on the Hail Mary. I don't care about that. I really don't. So he's had one legitimate turnover in 4 games. He's done a much better job protecting the ball. That's great. And finally, I'll get to the receivers now. I think John Ross's presence, that was the one signing I said when we did the free agency thing that I liked it right away because he was 1 year, $2.5 million. It's low risk, high reward for a guy who can fly. And it was a top 10 pick a few years ago. And I know he's had the injury problems and drops, but he adds an element of the offense that even Darius Slayton can't quite bring. And because defenses have to respect his speed, I think it left a lot more room underneath for Galladay and Kadarius Toney to thrive. And I was yelling during the Atlanta game, especially after Shepard and Slayton got hurt, get Kadarius Toney involved. He's pretty much your only healthy weapon left because Ross was not active for that game. This was his first one. And Galladay clearly wasn't 100%, and Toney still didn't get involved. And that's where I'm thinking, where I said, I don't think Jason Garrett's smart enough to use him correctly, but we saw a lot more of that in this game, thankfully. And we know he's best in the short areas. And I think part of just having Ross being able to stretch the field vertically left more room for Kadarius Toney in the short area. He could make people miss. That's where he thrives. And I was encouraged by that. It was the first game where he was used in a more intelligent way. And the first game where he started to justify the high pick into him.
Yeah, no Sterling Shepard in this one, obviously, as well. So, I mean, this was an opportunity for some of these depth receivers to show up, and they did. And Kenny Galladay finally had his first big game with the Giants, went over 100 yards in that one. And, I mean, there were some other ones. Kyle Rudolph had a catch or 2 catches in that one. He had one down the sideline, I remember. But, I mean, there were a couple. I mean, this was your week to show, okay, you went into New Orleans, a team that shut down Devontae Adams and the Packers in week 1. And you went out there without your top receiver talent, and you still found a way to win. And Daniel Jones threw for 400 yards on that defense, something Aaron Rodgers couldn't do in week 1. So I think this is a great showing from this Giants offense.
Well, wait, you're calling Daniel Jones Aaron Rodgers now?
He's better than him.
Okay, well, that's I think that's going to be a little bit over dramatic, but it was a good game for Jones. I think in credit where it's due here, I think it was a better game for Jason Garrett too. I'm still not a fan of him overall, but I thought the play calling was much better for once. Finally, they used the pass to set up the run rather than the other way around, which was way too stale and predictable. And setting up the pass with the run not only made the running game a little bit more effective, but it also opened up a lot for Saquon Barkley as a receiver, and which is going to be a strength of his game when he's healthy. Like we know what a threat he is out of the backfield. So even without Shepard and Slayton, I like Darius Slayton overall, despite that horrible drop in the Washington game. But I think this is his last year in New York either way, because the Giants have a pretty good amount of depth at wide receiver now. And if you can use Barkley on the outside too, it's just, I don't see him getting too many snaps, and he doesn't quite have that same speed that Ross does. Like, I'm not saying John Ross is perfect, and give him some credit. Like that catch he made in the second quarter for the touchdown, that's what you think of for him. But he also had 2 big catches on that drive in overtime where he was able to make some plays along the sidelines. So I'm curious to see how he's used going forward. But I think just having him on the field opens things up more. Galladay, I thought, looked a lot better, which is really encouraging because the Giants paid him big buku money, and we need him to show up, considering the big financial investment into him. He's talented, but injury prone. And I thought it was that drive where the Giants kicked a field goal to tie the game. I didn't love the approach overall because the Giants were down 3. They got that ball with 3 minutes left, 2 timeouts, 2-minute warning, and still clearly played for the tie rather than to just win it right there. And it worked out this time, but it doesn't always happen that way, as any NFL fan will attest. But the biggest play was on that 3rd and 7, the slant to Galladay, who broke a tackle, ran it all the way into a field goal range. And then in overtime, I think it was a 3rd and 5 from the Saints 20-something yard line. Galladay was wide open on the crossing route, got to the 5-yard line. Barkley scored on the next play to win it. So he made some big plays when it mattered. Tony had, I think his best play was the 3rd and 18, where he made about 4 people miss and converted somehow. But he showed his wiggle and ability after the catch all night. Ross had the touchdown. He stretched the field. The thing I would still complain about if I had to pick something is the tight end usage. I've said, I've seen enough of Evan Ingram, and Kyle Rudolph just looks like the slowest player on the field right now. I know he had that one catch down the sideline. I want to see more Caden Smith. I really do. I think he's justified it, and I think he's looked better in limited playing time than the other two have.
Yeah, I like that. I've always liked Caden Smith. He came from Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken. That's where he was originally when he started his career. But how do you feel about the defense in that game? I mean, that's one area we haven't touched on yet before we head over to the Jets. What were your takeaways from the defense for the Giants?
I haven't really been encouraged with the defense. Even with this win, there's a lot of things, and I got to say the biggest disappointment for the Giants has been the safety play. The fact with Logan Ryan, Xavier McKinney, Jabril Peppers, I thought that the secondary, along with James Bradbury and Dory Jackson on the outside, and even to a lesser extent, like Aaron Robinson will be back in a few weeks, but it just hasn't worked out that way. Like I thought that was going to be a top 5, top 10 secondary, and Peppers in particular. Like, yes, I did love the coin toss. That was pretty funny. We want that ball. Fuck him. I like it. That was great. But his pass coverage is not. He's been torched all season, and I know that's never been the strength of his game, but he gave up a touchdown in this game on a 3rd and 15 to a tight end. I know I mentioned that before we recorded, but it's inexcusable. When targeting him, I think this was on SB Nation, opponents are 13 to 15 throwing balls his way. So he's just not breaking anything up. Losing Blake Martinez in the middle doesn't help the situation. I think Azeez Ojulari has been a bright spot. I think he's off to a nice start, but I'm not encouraged by the defense overall. I think it's been slightly better the last couple of weeks, but it's not winning games like it did for the Giants, at least a little bit near in the second half of last season. And that's disappointing considering most of the players are back and the talent and finances invested in it.
And the coaching staff's back. It's not like Patrick Graham went anywhere. So I think that's another thing to be taken into account of. But I like your point about Azeez Ojulari. He didn't have the biggest game from a stat standpoint looking here against the New Orleans Saints, but so far in his rookie year, he looks like that one pass rusher that we've said multiple times. The Giants pass rush over the years has been pretty bad. I think Ojulari, give him some time. He's going to be one of these under the radar great pass rushers. Sort of, I'm not going to draw this comparison, but the way Yannick Ngakoue in the middle rounds of the Jaguars sort of was buried behind Calais Campbell, Dante Fowler, worked his way in a little bit, got some sacks, and eventually turned into a great edge rusher. So I think maybe we could see something there with Azeez Ojulari as we move forward here in the season.
I'm hoping so, but even if that does happen, he can't be a pass rush by himself. Long term, it's an area that the Giants are going to need to add more to. But I did like that pick at the time, trading down, getting mid-50, I thought was a good value. And so far he's been a good return on investment, but I still have a ton of questions about the defense, and I'll dive more into that film. It's just been average at best, and they still can't stop a nosebleed, the 2-minute drill. It happened again the end of the first half here. And that's been a problem for years, going back multiple defense personnel, whether it's players, coaching staff, coordinators, whoever. It's been a big problem. It hasn't subsided, and you give up points in the 2-minute drill, you lose games.
Yeah, that's
not this game, but most other games.
Yeah, not this one. Not when you got Danny Dimes throwing the ball. But let's take a look. He
played
here.
Well. Let's give him credit.
Let's take a look here. You're going up next week at Dallas, and in Jerry World, a potent offense there in Dallas. What are your thoughts?
It's going to be a high-scoring game, I think. I know that's weird saying about the Giants. I think Jason Garrett will be motivated a little bit against his former team like he was last year. Those were two of the Giants' better offensive games. And the Cowboys don't have a great defense, but I still trust their offense more than ours. It's still better. Let's be realistic here. It's going to sound weird. I'm going to go 35-31 Dallas.
Ooh, wow. You got a close one. All right. All right. I
Yeah.
can see that. I am going to go Dallas. Don't kill me. Dallas 38, Giants 23.
Yeah, I know it's weird. I have a weird feeling it'll be closer than it should be. I still don't think it's going to be a win, but if the Giants are really in the narrative of saving their season, they're going to have to find a way. Now what they normally do is play closer than they should and then fuck it up at the end, but we'll see.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. A team that didn't mess it up in the end is the New York Jets, who found a way to pull it out in overtime. How many times have we seen this in our existence? I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. If not, don't worry about it because I'm sure it's a random stat. How many times have the Jets and Giants both won in overtime on the same exact Sunday?
I'm guessing not many, if at
Not
all.
many. Not many. I mean, the Jets, they found a way to beat the Tennessee Titans, who, I'll say it, if the Titans lose to the Jaguars this week, back-to-back week, Jets, Jaguars, I think that they are, I don't want to say cooked because it's early in the season. They're in a tough division, but man, the Titans, they're not looking too good. I know they didn't have A.J. Brown. No, they didn't have Julio Jones. It was, Tannehill was checking down a lot. Jeremy McNichols had 8 catches, led their team in receptions. But the Jets, I got to tip my hat there. Jets in the second half looked like a great football team. They sort of made that adjustment the way that they did against Carolina in week 1. Zach Wilson ended up throwing for 297 yards and 2 touchdowns. Beats my prediction of 200, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. The Jets found a way to win. Caps off to them.
Yeah, in retrospect, there was a small part of me that was kind of thinking about predicting to pull off the upset, and obviously hindsight's 2020. I'm a little mad I didn't now, but the reason I thought about it was because one of the Jets' wins last year was against Cleveland when the Browns did not have any of their wide receivers available because of the contact tracing and everything. And wide receiver is one of the premium positions in the NFL that you can't win without. And so I thought the Jets last year were so bad where they still might lose the game. But this year, I think they're at least a little bit better than last year. And the Titans missing A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, that matters. So, I predicted it to be a closer game, but you can't win without at least somebody able to win one-on-one battles on the outside. Like, slot receivers can only get you so far sometimes. And the Jets, I think the best part of the game for them is they absolutely dominated in the trenches against the Titans offensive line that frankly played like shit. It's not supposed to be that bad, but the Jets had 7 sacks in this game. Quinnen Williams was dominant. I had a feeling we are going to see more from him, but I was not expecting Tannehill to be under that much pressure the whole game. We started to see that culture. Zach Wilson played a lot better in the second half, and Corey Davis bounced back after a couple of rough weeks. I thought we got to give him some credit too, but I thought the Jets overall were the better team in this game. I know that's weird. They didn't take the lead until the third quarter, but I think they were the better team overall, and they actually deserved to win.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I'll agree with that. And this Jets team is really cool. Not only did Quinnen Williams pick up a pair of sacks, but his brother Quincy ended up getting a sack too. Quincy Williams has been a beast since coming over to the Jets with that system. I think the two brothers together, that's really cool to see them both get a sack in the same game against the Tennessee Titans, who were a playoff team last year and a team that's really good. So it's a hats off to that defense. That's where I think we should start mainly is looking at that defense. C.J. Mosley, he finally looks back. He looks ready to go. And, he opted out last year, had the ACL before that. I think C.J. Mosley's a big piece. He's a veteran presence on that defense that Robert Saleh is trying to mix together. So, the Jets' defense is looking very good to start this year.
This is completely unrelated. I've been to a couple of bars called Two Brothers in my life. So
Nice.
shout out to those real quick. I don't know why, but I just felt like that was necessary. So yeah,
It is.
our show. I can say whatever I want. The I think we're starting to see a little bit of that culture shift. Even Robert Saleh at his worst. Are you ever going to confuse him for the monotonous drawl that was the coaching tenure of Adam Gase?
No.
He who shall not be named ever again on this podcast, if Jets fans have anything to say about it. And they're a chunk of our listener base, so they probably should. But we should focus ahead a little bit. So we know the energy provided. Now, I still have some questions about being able to win one-on-one pass rush battles after that Carl Lawson loss, but bringing more people, it's at least going to put pressure on offensive lines. And while I don't think it's going to come this naturally, considering the Titans just didn't have the same options to throw the ball that they normally would. And that allowed the Jets to stack the box more against Derrick Henry without the threat of being beat deep as much. That definitely provided them a layer of comfort that most teams facing the Titans won't have. But give them credit because it's still a very smart approach overall. It's something they took advantage of. I think it's something to build off. And Zach Wilson, I thought we're starting to see steps in the right direction from him too. Now, like I said about Fields, whatever he ends up doing this year, I don't think we should judge him too hard in year one. There's going to be flashes of brilliance. There's going to be places where he looks like shit. We've already seen that in the Patriots game, for example, but I don't think either of them are entirely representative of who he's going to end up being. I think he's going to get a little bit better, but we saw that Zach Wilson who can make exciting plays happen off script. That's the biggest strength of him as a passer. And we saw him make some amazing plays out of the pocket on the run, finding people down the field. I thought it was a glimpse of what the Jets were hoping to see and something that hopefully he can build off of for his own confidence going forward.
One name we wouldn't stop talking about last year, he was our guy for when we talked about the Jets. Jamison Crowder made his return to the team. We talked about him every single week last year. I mean, that dude was putting up numbers with Sam Darnold and that terrible Adam Gase-led team. But look, he came back, he was healthy, and he was a security blanket for Zach Wilson there. I think he could have a big boost for his success as the season goes on. 7 catches, 60-plus yards, and a touchdown. He's that one receiver. Obviously, you have Corey Davis on the outside, sprinkle in some Keelan Cole. They got some rookies they're benching. You got Jamison Crowder, who's just that safe veteran option. And when he's healthy on the field, it looked like maybe it was just the script that was going on there. But I think Zach Wilson feels very comfortable throwing to him.
And I'm not surprised by that. I think Crowder fulfills a similar role on the Jets that Sterling Shepard does on the Giants, a bit of a security. A bit of a security blanket in the slot there. He operates as a veteran. I never thought Jamison Crowder was a bad player or anything. Now, was he worth the draft pick? I'm not so sure, but that sounds like Washington's problem. Now, I don't know how much longer Crowder's going to stick around. I could still argue might not be worth what the Jets signed him to, but in a limited role, he can absolutely have a positive impact. And I think he's a better veteran for Wilson to throw the ball to than Braxton Berrios. So there's a step in the right direction there. I don't love Corey Davis as a number 1 wide receiver, although he was much better in this game. Keelan Cole had a big catch in the second half as well. And I think he's at least a serviceable NFL wide receiver. But if you're the Jets, ideally, wouldn't you want him as your number 4 or 5, considering you signed Davis to the big contract, you have Crowder back, and then you have recent second-round picks and Elijah Moore and Denzel Mims?
Yeah, that's what you want. You'd like to see those rookies on the field, but something weird's happening there.
And I'm looking forward to diving into that a little bit more. We've mentioned Mims a little bit more the last couple of weeks, and I loved the Elijah Moore pick from the start, and he was getting rave reviews in training camp in the offseason. So I still think he will be an important piece. But I'm going to honestly do a little bit of reading into. We'll preview that for next week. Yeah. What the hell is going on with the Jets wide receivers and how they're being used? I think that's a good segment, a good little teaser, but that's something we got to talk about after we get through hockey.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we really don't have much to say. I mean, Michael Carter, once again, he seemed like he's taking over that backfield a little bit. He was another piece of that ground game. I mean, the more carries he gets, I think is better for this team. I just think he's the best back in that backfield, so hopefully they can continue to utilize him as the season goes on. But that's really my last point on the offense.
Well, real quick, I mean, like we mentioned the defense. I think they dominated in the trenches, but they were smart enough, despite their limited resources. And Marcus May, by the way, is facing his charges from the DUI he had in the offseason. So I'm curious to see if that has any impact on the field. Yeah, I'm not trying to go off the field for that one specifically, but I am curious to see if that forces him to miss any time. I know every legal case is a little bit different. I hope it doesn't for the Jets' sake. But yeah, they dominated up front. The Quincy Williams story is really cool, but I think the offense is the bigger focus long term, just because that's where Zach Wilson plays and he's the most important piece. But they were absolutely dominant up front. Definitely an encouraging sign for the Jets. And I want to give a shout out, actually. I think both Michael Carter picks have looked really good so far. I know it's kind of weird, but yeah, they made two separate ones, drafted the running back from North Carolina and the safety from Duke. And I think that Michael Carter, the safety, has also put on some solid tape to start the season. So it looks like they might have a couple of hits in the mid to late rounds of this draft so far.
Yeah, I'd agree with those. Now, look, they're the first team to play on Sunday. This one's going to be in London against the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons, they both come in here at 1-3. The Falcons could have been 2-2 if they would have found a way to manage to hold on to that Washington game, but once again slipped right out of their fingers. How do you see this one turning out? Rookie travels to London.
That's a tough one. I think it's, first of all, kind of a fuck you to London from the NFL. Like, no offense here. Is this really the best we can do?
We don't get a game in a year, and you give us the Jets Falcons?
I mean, come on, man. I mean, okay, if you want to stop putting teams over there, we can do that. Okay. Gut feeling here. You're not gonna, I don't think I'll ever say this again. Jets win this one 21-14.
Okay. Jets 21-14. I'm also picking the Jets. I don't know why, but I'm picking the Jets.
I guess I've said this before. Gut feeling, just go with it. I should have done it last week. I did it with the playoff bracket for the NFL last year, and it worked out really well for me. It's just, if I listen to it, it's not always right, but it's better than when I get in my own head, like that thing we don't want Tony La Russa to do.
Yes. Don't get in your own head, Tony. I'm going to go low scoring here. I think both defenses are young. Both defenses have showed up this year. So I'm going to go low scoring, and I will say the Jets win this football game 17-14. Matt Amendola gets the field goal winner.
You're just taking 4 points off my Jets score again. I mean, what's with you in this micromanaging our score predictions, man?
I took at least 10 plus off of your Giants pick.
Well, all right, fine. But yeah, you go back to the Bears one and you say, 10 points, but we're going to take 4 off of each score. And then this one of them has the same point total. All right. Yeah, but 2 out of 3, you're just haggling me for no reason here, man. Come on.
Yeah. All right. You know what? Next week, we'll be diving into some NHL stuff. Be sure you check it out here on the Big City Sports Podcast. It's back. It's on ESPN. It's on Turner Sports, all that good stuff. So different networks going on there. But, hey, the NHL is back, and it should be a lot of fun. I'm excited to preview that. The Blackhawks are showing some promise early in the preseason, and the way they gelled their roster together. The Rangers, coming off of last season, looking to build. The Islanders, they were a postseason team. We'll dive into all that next week. Also talk a little bit of what happened to our NFL teams this week. But, maybe the White Sox advance as well by the time we drop the next episode. But until then, be sure to check us out on this Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, all that good stuff. Leave a like, leave a subscribe, leave a follow, leave a comment, too, if you want that to be brought up on the show. But until next time, for Swig, I'm Dylan Kearns. This has been an episode of the Big City Sports Podcast.